Hi, and welcome to Up Front, a new talk show on Shaw TV where we discuss current events and topics of interest with local community groups and leaders. This first episode is all about food security in our region.
The Central Kootenay Food Policy Council was formed in 2016 and currently has 24 members that represent diverse locations, interests, and sectors across the Central Kootenay Regional District. The purpose of the council is to be the formal bridge between local government and the many civil society and industry organizations working on food systems in the region, from food access to farming.
Joining us in studio for our first episode of Up Front is Abra Bryn, who is a coordinator with the Central Kootenay Food Policy Council, as well as Ramona Fost, who is the director for Area E with the Regional District of Central Kootenay. Thank you for coming in today, ladies. We're talking about the Central Kootenay Food Policy Council, which just formed in December of 2016. So first off, can you please give us some background on the Central Kootenay Food Policy Council? Why form a council? Why do we need one?
It's been talked about for many years, and there have been various reports that have suggested that some kind of convening organization for all the different initiatives and farm organizations and nonprofits that are trying to address food systems needs they've been written and suggested that some form of cooperation would be more effective in addressing these needs. But we had a particularly important meeting in March of 2015 where we talked about how we can invest more wisely in the food systems of the region, and we brought together local government folks as well as funders in the area and just had a conversation about what is a food system, how are you already implicated in it, what are you doing in it, how could we do this better. And out of that meeting was the suggestion that in fact it would make sense for us to create a food policy council so that we could have an organization that would convene all that work but also have a formal link to local government, because policy does have an impact on what we can and can't do in our food systems.
As a local government representative, we're called on to assist people with land use regulation, and we want to be able to make them user-friendly. We want to use them as tools to build the food sector in the Kootenays. We know that there's tremendous interest amongst the public that we serve, and we also know that there's enabling conditions and there's disabling conditions. Also, as someone who provides funds to local organization, and I sit on the boards or advisories for a number of organizations that provide funds, we'd like to know that we're actually serving the priorities of the sector and the communities that the sectors operate in. So the Food Policy Council had some allure from that perspective.
Okay. Now, I did read on the website that there are lots of other communities in BC and across Canada that have food policy councils. It seems like having a food policy council is a natural fit for the Kootenays. I wonder, why did it take so long to get a food policy council here?
I think because most of the other food policy councils that do exist in North America are specific to a smaller geographic region. So generally they're affiliated with a municipal government and not with a broader hybrid of rural and municipal. And so I think that's why it took us some time in the Central Kootenays to figure out if we actually want to work on a food system, we can't just look at a small little city. It doesn't, a lot of it happens there, but if we don't engage the larger region and all the food production capabilities there, that we wouldn't really be particularly effective. But then we ran into the barrier of how do we actually unite people across an area as diverse as the Central Kootenay, because we have distance issues, particularly in winter. Sometimes roads are shut down, driving that kind of commitment of time of people to get to a central location or a location anywhere, and then just factoring in all the diverse needs and issues and cultures that are spread across the Central Kootenay. It took us some time to figure out, yes, in fact, this is necessary, and we can use present-day technology to make those connections that we think will really result in some positive collaborations.
As you said, it really encompasses a wider area, a diverse area, and I kind of feel like that plays into your council members a little bit. I noticed that the council has more than 20 members participating, working together. tell us a little bit about the council members and how they were chosen or asked to be part of the initiative.
So we didn't just dive into saying, okay, we're making a food policy council. We took the time with some project funding from various funders to figure out what could be a governance model that would work, that would genuinely represent the diverse communities, but also the different sectors that are involved in food systems. So there's governmental, there's food systems, and there's community. Because there are community organizations working on emergency food and people who are hungry. There are industry organizations that represent food processors or farmers. And then there's education and local government and health authorities. All of those different actors are involved in food systems and have an important contribution to make to our work as a council. So ultimately we created that grid, and then we put out a call asking people to let us know how they're involved in their sector or their community, why they want to participate in the Food Policy Council, and what they could bring to it. And then we used that grid to essentially populate the applicants so that we knew we had a nice diverse spread both geographically and across those different representative groups.
I think it was particularly important to me to see diversity and that all sectors are represented. I know what brings people together, and I know what drives them apart. And so I think feeling that your voice isn't heard is one of the things that I hear most often as a public representative. Mm-hmm. I know that I represent funding bodies on the council at this point. The project does have funding bodies, Interior Health, the Real Estate Foundation, CBT, and the RDCK. So it's got a broad base of support, and all of those entities have constituents that they're responsible to. So I think that the way that it was done, it really encourages that broad voice, and it will be somewhat up to us as councillors to go to our representative sectors as best we can and explain what our hopes and dreams and activities are. Mm-hmm. And that's difficult, because I'm not saying I represent every funder that funds food, but if I can reach out to some of them and just explain what the issues and opportunities are, that would be a great thing.
Okay. What is the ultimate goal or mission for this Food Policy Council?
So we just had our first in-person meeting, and there's a lot of learning for the councillors to do, because they have knowledge of their own sectors and communities, but not necessarily what this new beast, the Food Policy Council, is. So there's a fair bit of work to bring everybody up to speed and know we're all sort of heading in the same direction together. So we did spend a bunch of time at our meeting on March 6th just talking through what is it that we want to achieve, what is our specific mission statement, because I, as the project coordinator, and then the council coordinator, could create some of the verbiage around what we're going to do, mm-hmm. drawing on past work, but ultimately the council needs to own that. So we haven't explicitly landed on a mission statement, but ultimately the purpose of it is, we know that across the sectors and the communities in the Central Kootenay, so many individuals and organizations are working with scarce resources and few, mostly burnt out volunteers trying to make positive change in their communities. And we want to see that be easier for them. And some of the ways in which you make that easier is by helping them connect to each other, helping them connect to working models, helping them know what funding opportunities are there, and then explicitly the Food Policy Council will also be looking at what are changes in policy that could make things work better.
We're back in studio with Upfront, talking with Abra Bryn and Ramona Fost from the Central Kootenay Food Policy Council. So now, ladies, let's talk about what you and the council see as some of the top issues facing our local food system.
Well, we've got aging farmers, and that's a little bit frightening. And every agricultural census, which happens every 5 years, there's yet more that we've lost. Many fewer farmers on the ground, as well as they're getting older and older. So we definitely need to figure out how to replace the people who are working in the food systems and enable them to retire gracefully and with dignity. We need to figure out how we can get more of the land that is suitable for agriculture in the Central Kootenays into production. A lot of it has to do with people, but it's also, there's a huge issue around, part of the reason that we don't have a lot of people lining up to become farmers is because it's really hard to make a living as a farmer. So we also have to strengthen the local market opportunities, because when you have local supply chains, there's more leverage for the food producers in those relationships, I believe. Food systems are really complex. There is no one silver bullet solution for them. So it's very, very, very many different actors, and that's why the Food Policy Council is as diverse as it is and wants to address the policy piece, because we can push one lever and maybe figure out how to get more people on the land, but if we're not also engaging with the regional market opportunities so that they have the policies and the inclination in place to be buying food from those farmers, that's not going to work. And if we're not working with local government to make sure that, as an example, on those farms, it's okay to process their own product and or buy product from other farmers and process it there. Like there's just so many different things we need to coordinate collectively in order for it to all really thrive, because it really is a supply or value chain where they all need to work in order for it to flow through to the ultimate eater.
Okay. I'd like to bring up some topics that were posed to us through social media, through some discussion that we tried to generate on our Shaw TV Kootenay's Facebook page. And one issue that was posted and liked by a few people was the topic of a local abattoir. I know, Abra, you've got some experience with abattoirs. Let's talk about what it means here locally in the Central Kootenay to have a local abattoir. There is a mobile unit, I believe, but is the model that we have now working for our local producers?
Yes and no. I think what we're dealing with is the fact that it's within quite recent memory that the government changed the regulations. So before 2007, farmers in this region were used to having people come to their farms, slaughter their animals on farms, do the processing, and then they could sell it to their neighbors. They could put it in their own freezer, and it was part of the community's culture, part of the soil fertility management by having livestock on the land, part of our food security. And when the government changed the regulations so that you could only even give away meat, never mind sell it, if it had gone through a licensed abattoir, it just abruptly stopped everything in a lot of communities and really decimated those cultures, those local economies, the trading and bartering that happens in rural communities. And we've never fully recovered from that, and I don't know that we will. So some people, it is inevitable. Some people are continuing those practices. They're far enough off the radar of any kind of oversight agency that happens. But others are taking advantage of the fact that there are 2 licensed abattoirs in the Central Kootenay. One that does, actually there's 3. There's 2 poultry abattoirs, and there's one that does red meat. It's difficult for some farmers still to access them, even though they're there, they're licensed, they have inspected meat coming out of them, because they're not geographically like they're not in their particular neighborhood. Right. So it's a commitment of time and effort to get the animals to those facilities. And for some people, their practice of raising animals doesn't get them accustomed to being handled by people or being in trailers. So it can add real stress to both the farmer and the animals if that transportation is not something any of them are used to. But for those who can navigate that and get their animals to those abattoirs, it does open up huge opportunities in terms of the demand for local meat here. I think residents in the Central Kootenay both have a history of being able to eat good quality farm meat, and also recognize that those smaller scale facilities are producing animals that generally are handled better, eat food where they know the quality is reasonable, and they're going to get a great meat product out at the end.
Is that something that you've heard in your area as a regional district director, Ramona?
Absolutely. I always say sometimes the rules that government makes you know, cheaters out of honest people. And so I would say that I'm sure there's a great economy going on, but that many people just can't come to the surface with it. And you know, I'd like to say that when I first moved to where I lived, I could get local milk, local apple juice, local eggs, and we don't eat meat, but if I did, I could get it. And it was all above board, or it just had ended where it wasn't. And now it's very difficult to suss those things out. And so the meat regulations have been a source of angst for regional district directors, and I've been a part of going to see the Minister of Agriculture about some way to permit a more robust approach to allowing neighborhood slaughter. It's a stress on the animals. It means that each farmer has to have their own infrastructure or go cooperatively in with people they know. Their farms might not be close. There's just a whole lot of problems that end up coming up on the ground. And so I definitely have heard that when we talk to people in the community about what we could do, the slaughter regulations are something that comes up all the time.
Do you think that the abattoir issue is something that the Food Policy Council will be looking at?
Well, given that it's certainly a common issue that arises across the central Kootenay, I would expect that we may well get involved in some way. But one of the things that the Central Kootenay Food Policy Council is going to try and be really sensitive to is where somebody else is already doing some work around something, we don't want to step in and take it over. We want to support it or just get out of the way. Because lots of times, as Ramona knows well, communities really know what it is they want and need, and they just need other people to get out of the way or just promote it, support it, help them understand the regulatory issues, maybe access some funding possibilities. So we essentially really want to operate as a resource and a support when wanted, but get out of the way when people have got it well underhand.
We're back with Upfront, talking with the Central Kootenay Food Policy Council. And Ramona, we're going to talk now about water. We had a question on our social media about water rate increases and what this could mean for area gardeners. What are your thoughts on gardeners receiving some kind of exemption for reducing carbon footprints through growing their own food?
That's a really interesting question, and it's not one that we've considered at the regional district. We are looking at, you know, how we can conserve water, most particularly in the times of drought, so that there is water for everyone who needs it, and with the knowledge that people are growing their own food. I think at the provincial level, they're trying to also figure out how to make sure that food production does have some priority in the hierarchy of needs, that they come in somewhere ahead of golf courses or something like that. As far as water rates within the regional district of Central Kootenay, the ones that we manage, each system is in a different state of condition, has a different amount of water that it can deliver, has a different amount of growth in the number of connections that it can take on. And so the water rates even between the systems in the regional district will really depend on how that system, what kind of system that shape was in when we took it on. So in order to either reduce water rates for nonprofits, which is another question that we get asked, or gardeners, it means that the other water users have to be willing to take on that cost. So we haven't had those conversations in community yet to say, if food production is important to you, can we reduce the costs for gardeners and farmers? And are the rest of you willing to bear a percentage higher cost for the fact that we're reducing it? Because the cost of something is like a circle. If you take one piece of the pie out, then the pie is no longer whole. So The rest of it is compensating if it wants to make that circle whole again. And we all know that pies don't work that way.
Right.
I think that definitely, as far as water availability is concerned, there should be some hierarchy for growing food when water is scarce. But we haven't had the discussion about should there be different water rates for people who are growing food. And would it be that you're growing food for yourself or growing food for a large quantity of people? So it raises a really great question, and it's something that if I have the luxury of having a conversation with my peers, that I would love to have a discussion about that.
So the city of Castlegar currently right now is in the process of launching their backyard bees and urban chickens pilot project. Tell me a little bit about what you both think about backyard chickens and backyard bees playing into the local food system.
Well, personally, I think that the more people actually understand what it is to raise food, to grow food, the more they appreciate others who do it full time for a living. So in some ways, it's part of that food literacy thing. When you realize actually it's not that easy to grow a great long carrot, then you might be willing to pay the farmer better who does grow it for you. And same with chickens and bees. I mean, honey is a fabulous product that a lot of us really appreciate in our daily lives. So, but a lot of those things can be done at a small scale. It's an opportunity for us to build regional food security by having people produce more of their own in their backyard. So when it's possible at that scale, I think it's a great idea. Each municipality has to figure out how they can make it work in their own region or not. So I think it's fabulous that Castlegar is starting this pilot project, because essentially the Food Policy Council will keep a close eye on that, see how the pilot goes, maybe help them understand that there's some other great models for the wording of those kinds of bylaws and dealing with the issues like when someone needs to have their chickens taken away because they are really not managing them well, then where do those chickens go? Who then takes over their welfare or not? Those are issues that genuinely face a local government, and if we can figure them out or help them understand somebody else has figured them out, then hopefully we can see that kind of proliferation of more household level food production, because that eases the burden and the demand on external food systems, or enables farmers to maybe focus on the things that make more sense at that larger scale.
So you mentioned that something like this pilot project is something that the Food Policy Council will keep an eye on, and maybe use as a model to show other communities. If you see it being a success, would the council advocate for programs like this in the other communities in the area?
I could certainly see that happening.
Okay.
Because ultimately, changes in policy that are more supportive of food systems, what we have to do is help them understand they don't have to invent a wheel that's already rolling well, and then build the political will to make it happen. And we build the political will through a combination of means. So convincing the politicians that it's something that's safe for them to take on and direct their staff to do, and that actually their population, their constituents are interested in seeing this happen, and that it's ultimately for the public good.
Right, okay. We're starting to run out of time here on the show, but I would lastly just like to touch on food security and food costs. Ramona, we all know eating healthy isn't cheap. Is the cost of healthy organic food, local organic food, something that is on the council's radar?
I think it is. I think that the cost of food in general is on the council's radar because it's part of a larger global system, and some of those things we aren't in control of. We had discussions about how you can get garlic from China that is $2 a pound less expensive than garlic from down the road. And so there's so many factors that go into why that exists in our global marketplace that you sometimes have to drill it down small. I would say if you want to eat healthy food, buy from your local farmer. If you can find a way to do that, you are most of the time going to get a very good deal from giving the money directly to your local farmer. Local stores that seek out produce that's grown near them are another great source. But every time someone needs to make some money off of anything, the price will go up. Farmers markets are another great way to go out. We had a project in Castlegar where we purchased food directly from the farmers. We added 25 cents a pound to it to distribute it out into the community to people that could afford to buy it. When the 25 cents came back to that, we invested in more of that farmer's food to distribute to our emergency food program. So there's a lot of creative ways that you can get around that. People in town were happy to not have to make the drive out to get the food from the farmer. They were willing to pay the 25 cents, knowing that it went to something good. And that way we felt good about the carrots that we were distributing. Another great contributor to that was a woman that was willing to drive back seconds and thirds of fruit from the Okanagan so that we could distribute them, and they otherwise would have gone to waste. Now in Creston, they've got a juicer that's going to be providing that same function, and it can come to communities. Several of us invested in it from this side of the hill, and so that can be fundraisers, it can go to food kitchens. So we just really need to all sit and put our thinking caps on, and I know, in this council there's some beautiful minds, so we're going to come up with some ways. But I think we also have to recognize that people are making a living at this if they're going to be able to provide enough to feed us all, and that we cannot compete with the price of cheap oil, cheap labor that goes into creating garlic that's grown, half a world away.
Yeah.
If I may, the Caslo model is brilliant, and I have talked about it all across the country because it's so important. Because one of the things that this conversation tends to stop at, people are hungry and they can't afford that good food, so this is an elitist approach. But what Caslo has demonstrated is it doesn't have to be an either or. We can figure out how we adequately compensate the farmers when we have food that we're managing locally, when we bring democracy back to our food systems where we live, so that you can figure out how you get the adequate money to the farmers, and you bring the values of supporting your neighbors into managing that supply and that distribution. So it's exactly the ideal model of a food system, and that's what we would hope to disseminate across the region. Because we need farmers to be able to make a living. We want everyone to be well fed, and they shouldn't be in conflict with each other.
Okay. I just want to thank you both for coming in today and being guests on our first episode of Upfront. It was a real pleasure. Thank you. And if folks out there do want more information on the Central Kootenay Food Policy Council, where could they find that?
We have a website, which is CK for Central Kootenay, foodpolicy.ca, and we have a contact form on there. We've got a survey asking people what they'd like us to work on, because that information will get factored into the council discussions and priorities. And we also have the ability for people to sign up, and we can keep them in touch with our e-news.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ramona. Thank you, Abra.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you very much.
I'm Kristina Kruchkowski. This was Upfront. Thanks for watching.